Hey, Raindrops, we're back for another episode, True Crime Thursdays. Before we get started, I just want to thank all the Raindrops and everybody, including Ebony K. Williams, legion of fans, who have really gave so much positive, I can't even talk, positive response to our episode last week. So we are at it again to really discuss Diddy's trial. Ebony K. Williams, how are you?
Fabulous, King Carlos. How are you, love?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Listen, I am having so much fun doing this with you because, as you know, we're both fellow journalists. And this is kind of like a side of me, Ebony, that you may know, but a lot of people don't. Like, I'm into investigative journalism. I love all things court TV. So to be able to have an excuse to be with you, trust me, this is like the highlight of my week.
Oh, no, I love it, honey. Carlos, Raindrops, he's in his bag on this one. This is Dan Rather meets Lester Holt meets, here's a good one, Dominique Dunn. What you know about that Dominique Dunn, honey? It's giving that. Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We have so much to dive into, Ebony. So the latest is this. I want to talk to you about former Danity Kane member Dawn Richard, who testified recently to really sort of tell her side of the story as it related not only to her experience with Puff, but also being an eyewitness to some of the abuse that Cassie allegedly, and we're saying allegedly again, everybody, because this is a court case where you are innocent until proven guilty, although we all did see the video of Puff putting his hands on Cassie. So disclaimer there. Dawn Richard has been interviewed before about this, and something interesting happened during her testimony where the defense were poking holes into it. So give us the update and the highlight of Dawn Richard's testimony in this Puff trial.
Indeed, Carlos. So I think the big takeaway about the Dawn Richard of it all is I'm going to start by saying from a legal perspective, I think her testimony is what we will call a wash. Okay. Meaning that essentially, I don't believe it will hold very much weight, if you will. I don't believe it's going to move the needle one way or another when it comes to ultimately what this jury decides. And let me tell you exactly why I'm saying that. This is not to be dismissive of any abuse that Miss Richard might have endured. This is not to say that she is totally to be not believed, but it is to say, see, Carlos, when these types of witnesses, especially these eyewitnesses, people that are called to the stand to give an accounting of what they bore witness to or experienced firsthand or secondhand, because she, like you said, is really being called to testify to both what she experienced with Sean Combs directly and what she witnessed when it came to Cassie Ventura. There's a constant balancing of the scales of believability and credibility. And when you say the defense poked holes in her testimony, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. When you're coming from the defense posture, your entire mandate really is to indict the credibility, the believability of said witness. Okay. When you're doing cross-examination, I'm talking about, it's different. At some point, we're going to hear from the defense, their own witnesses that they are calling to the stand to prove the veracity of their arguments. We will get to that later on in this trial. But right now, we're only seeing the defense playbook, if you will, coming from the place of cross-examination. So the prosecutors will put a witness on the stand that they believe helps prove their case, their theory of the case, and the guilt beyond the reasonable doubt of Sean Combs. And then the defense will do exactly what we saw the Black female defense attorney, I believe it's Miss Westmoreland, do to Dawn Richard, which is, let's just talk about the skillet and the eggs. Let's use that for an example. We know that one of the things that Dawn Richard testified to on direct exam when she was being questioned by the prosecutors was an episode that we were told about where Dawn Richard witnessed Sean Combs allegedly try to hit Cassie Ventura in the head with a skillet that had eggs in it. Okay. And when we hear this again, Carlos, very, very sensational, very horrendous when you think of such an act. But then on cross-examination, Dawn Richard gets a bit caught up, right? Because now it's Well, did you hear a skillet hit the wall, or did you see with your own two eyes Sean Combs hit Cassie as you claimed you said? And then it becomes, well, I'm not sure. We heard Don, well, I believe, I can't recall. And see, that type of stuff, Carlos, goes to the credibility of the witness. And again, I'm not saying the young lady is not being truthful, meaning Don. But I am saying that if I'm a juror and I'm hearing one thing on direct exam, you said you saw and experienced this, but then when the defense counsel gets up and starts to kind of test the veracity of your story, now it's, well, I can't recall. I'm not sure. It was back in 2009. It was back in 2016. It was back in this. And now my memory's foggy. So that's why I said originally, Carlos, I believe her testimony will be a wash, because I don't believe that she proved herself to be the very best witness for the prosecution. I believe that we've already heard from Cassie Ventura herself. I believe the mother, which I know we're going to talk about Cassie's mother in a minute. I believe Cassie's mother was a better proof evidence of the alleged physical and sexual abuse that Cassie endured. I don't believe Don Richard really advanced the believability of the monster of Sean Combs, especially, Carlos, when the defense says, okay, so he threatened you, Miss Richard, of your life and safety. He gave you death threats. He told you that people come up missing, but then you didn't tell that to the prosecutors with the first 9 interviews that you. So again, the kind of poking of the holes. But anyways, he's this horrible, horrible, horrible individual, right, Miss Richard? Yes. Yes, he is, ma'am. So why did you want to work with him again over and over and over again as recently as 2021 and as recently as 2020? And again, Carlos King, I'm not saying that both things can't be true, that you could still want to work with a person who brought you to the dance, so to speak. We only really know who Don Richard is because of Making the Band, because of Sean Combs, Puff, and Danity Kane. And also, could she be in legitimate fear of him? Legitimate fear of her life, safety? Absolutely, because sometimes we do irrational things. But I do think from a jury perspective, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard pill to say, either I'm to believe you weren't that afraid of him, or I'm to believe that you were very afraid of him and you were willing to risk your very life for a career in music and entertainment. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, but I do think it's asking a lot of jurors to swallow.
And that's the point I wanted to bring up, because a lot of people online are really confused as to, okay, what we have known over the years and seen over the years is, yes, a large amount of women who are in abusive relationships with their husbands, boyfriends, fiance, etc. Unfortunately, a lot of them do stay for fear of their lives. A lot of them do stay because they still love this man and they see the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of it all. Mm-hmm. One of the things that people are saying on social media, Ebony, is the difference between maybe Cassie staying after abuse is because, again, with the years of us watching television, understanding abuse as much as we can, a lot of people are saying we understand the depths of a woman deciding to stay. Mm-hmm. What a lot of people are having a hard time to grasp is, okay, Don Richard, if you saw this man beat her, if you saw the skillet in the eggs, if he threatened your life, then what is sort of your rationale in electively calling him to return to the group Dirty Money? And I believe she admitted on the stands that she needed money, and that was the reason why she decided to possibly see if they can go back into business. Can we talk about the thought process within that from a juror standpoint, not for me and you personally, because again, we're here to state facts. I'm not here to judge anybody. Ebony and I are here to state facts. We're not talking about anything outside of that. Based on the jurors, is that going to be more challenging for a juror to grasp than it is possibly for Cassie staying in an abusive relationship?
1000%, Carlos. End of discussion. Well, not end, beginning really, but that is the point I'm making, right? When I say Cassie Ventura herself, who testified very early, star witness, the third voice we heard from, the first alleged victim of Sean Combs in this capacity. She has so far been the most compelling person to testify to the issue of how controlling, dangerous, depraved Sean Combs is. I think the testimony we heard from Don Richard, to the point you're making, kind of pales in comparison. Not because, like you said, not saying that she didn't receive anything, not saying that she didn't witness anything horrible, but saying that kind of the weight of her why, right? When we're talking about Cassie, we're talking about 10 years plus. We're talking about emotional connection. She says, even at the end of her testimony, Cassie said, I don't hate Sean Combs today. I still hold love for what we did have. That's very compelling testimony. And I'm going to tell you, Carlos, it makes Cassie even more believable to more jurors. Why? Because she's not trying to totally demonize him in his entirety. Like you said, she's speaking to the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde of it all. She's complete. She's testifying to a more completed picture. She's talking about why she loved him and why she was deathly afraid. She's talking about him as blowing up cars and kicking her in the back and dragging and beating the daylights out of her like a rag doll. Her words, not mine. And she's talking about the affection and the dinners and the love. So that's very believable. You know, that's very believable because it doesn't allow Cassie to be perfect. It doesn't allow us to see her as a perfect victim, because guess what, Carlos? There are no perfect victims. They're none. And we're all human beings having a human experience. And I believe that's what made Cassie so compelling. Now, we juxtapose that from Don Richard. Again, they're not supposed to have identical stories because they're operating in different capacities. But we do know that it's a lot more challenging for jurors to reconcile not only staying and wanting to continue a relationship professionally with Mr. Combs after these horrendous things that you experienced and bore witness to, Miss Richard. You asked the man for a solo deal. Like you're, in many ways, one could argue, and this is what the defense did argue, you're asking to up the ante with Sean Combs. You're asking to be in deeper relationship with Sean Combs after what you say were all the signifiers of a horrific experience. Now, was it because I was in financial duress, because I needed the money, as you mentioned, Carlos? It could be that, but here's the thing. I'm not saying it's not truthful. It's just less compelling. This is what I need the raindrops to understand. We're not saying Don Richard is lying. We're not saying Don Richard is not to be believed. But I am saying from a jury analysis standpoint, Carlos King, that is a much less compelling why continue involvement with this man that is such a monster than the Cassie Ventura, which is tied to the emotional component, the longevity component, the psychological warfare component that we can better understand in a romantic relationship capacity than a business posture. That's the difference.
Thanks for breaking that down, because that was the one thing I wanted to address, is based on the legalities of the case. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Cassie, her mother recently was on the stand, and one of the most provoking things that came out of this was the fact that when Puff was aware that Cassie was dating Kid Cudi, he wanted $20,000 given back to him that he gave Cassie, but he wanted that $20,000 back in exchange for not releasing possible sex tapes that he allegedly has of Cassie. Mm-hmm. The mother said on the stand along the lines of, she was so distraught and afraid that she put her home, I believe it was a home equity,
get a home equity line of credit to get that $20,000,
and to pay this billionaire $20,000 in exchange for not releasing a sex tape. Can you talk about Cassie's mom's testimony, the details of it, and what you think that did for the case?
I think hearing from Cassie's mom, Carlos, was second only to Cassie by way of compelling, believable, and credible. And here's why I say that. When we hear an older woman, right, a grandmother on the stand, bearing witness and recounting what I have to believe, and I can say this now as a mother of a daughter myself, that's got to be the worst days of your life. That's got to be the worst days of your life, whether he did do or didn't do, when your daughter shows up to your home with bruises on her back, with a busted lip, with, you know, open wounds on her face and body, bruises beyond measure, and you are taking snapshots to document because you are so in fear of what could be next to come to her and apparently your family. This is very important because it raises the stakes, Carlos, for all the jurors to know how absolutely difficult this must be for this woman, Regina Ventura, to recount in front of this galley of people, but also Sean Combs himself. You are telling this horrific story of your daughter's purported abuse and rape and horror in front of the alleged perpetrator. And the alleged perpetrator is not Joe Schmo off the street, but it is Sean Combs, billionaire mogul extraordinaire. This is very compelling for a juror to witness. Now, what she said was also important, Carlos, because to me, it's very believable in this particular way. This goes to the psychological warfare piece of Sean Combs being able to prove to Cassie, I can get you anywhere you go. There is nowhere on God's green earth you can go and hide that I can't still reach you, including your mama's house, including even your mother, your parents, your family cannot keep you safe. This is the purported prosecution. This is why the prosecutors put her on the stand, Carlos, for this reason, to prove the level and height of psychological, physical domain and control that Sean Combs can tell Cassie with complete certainty, I got your mama taking out a second mortgage on her house. That's how much control I have over your destiny, over your mere ability to live and function on this earth under the terms in which I dictate. That's the messaging. See how powerful that is? Because it wasn't your friend. We heard from the friend, and that was, it had its value. Let me say it that way. Mm-hmm. But nothing compares, Carlos, to when your mama, your family, the woman that birthed and brought you into this world cannot protect you from the reach and demand of this man. And believed the fear to be so palpable that she took out that second mortgage. And also the amount. Let's talk about the amount, because I'm sure, like me, Carlos, when you heard $20,000, and I'm sure the Raindrops said the same thing, it doesn't sound like a lot of money considering the players, right? Considering the billionaire status of Sean Combs, the multimillionaire we perceive status of even Cassie and the celebrities involved. $20,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but this is the psychology. He knows her mother can't go get $200,000 out the bank, even with a second mortgage. So no. Give me what you got. I'm going to make you go get what I know you do have, provide it to me. And that's going to remind you that you live, eat, breathe, and have shelter over your head because I let you. And don't you forget it. That's the psychological messaging of this particular $20,000 extortion is really what this would be, if indeed it is factual, of him demanding $20,000 in exchange for the not releasing of the sex tapes. But I wanted to lay out that psychology, Carlos, because it's very important. And not just that it was done with the mother. We would think if we were ever in an abusive situation, it would be our parents, your mama, your daddy, your grandpappy, son. This is the culture. Don't let my daddy find out. Don't let my mama find out. I'm gonna go to your mama's doorstep and I'm gonna tell her to put something on it. And that's how much control and domain I have over not just you, but the people that are charged to protect you. So no one can protect you from my reach. That's the messaging.
Ebony K. Williams, I cannot imagine doing this show without you because I did not even think about that. The psychology of the prosecution saying, let's bring the mother on. Because to your point, we have the star witness, which is Cassie Ventura. Mm-hmm. We have the best friend, which is primarily the person you spend the most time with, that have seen more things than the average person. But the psychology of the mother with the amount of $20,000, which is a lot of money in today's society, don't get me wrong, but to your point, when you juxtapose that against a billionaire, he doesn't need the money.
Not about the money. Right? That's how we know it's not about the money.
It's about the power and the control. And it hit me when you said this man, again, this is all alleged, this man allegedly is such a control freak that he wanted Cassie to know, I even have control over your mother, whose job is to protect you against someone like me. That hit me like a ton of bricks. And it brings me to this question that I have for you. Mm-hmm. The defense elected not to cross-examine the mother, which was shocking to all of us. Mm-hmm. Why did they not want to cross-examine the mother?
Because the jury is watching, meaning there is this woman is so sympathetic. The mother I'm talking about. Now, Cassie has some, she's pregnant, she's this, but she is, like I said, an imperfect victim, as all victims are. And I'm not saying Cassie's mama is perfect, but I'm saying the framing in which we have been introduced to her, we're not going to see her mama in a still of a Freakoff. We're not going to see the mama cozied up next to Sean Combs getting a shopping spree in Paris. We're not going to hear. So in terms of the facts as they relate to this case, she is a pure victim. The mother is a pure victim that does not have to carry kind of the stain, if you will, or the stigma of being complicit or a part of it, or it being any ambiguity around the role she played. And that is a dangerous witness to cross-examine. And one of the things that we learned at the very beginning of law school, Carlos, is don't never ask no witness a question you don't already know the answer to. And I can guarantee you that the defense team did not know, because they don't know enough. We don't know. None of us can know enough about this woman and what she really knows and what she could really say. So the best, most disciplined thing this defense has done so far, in my legal opinion, Carlos, is to resist the urge to always be talking and asking. And they did the right thing by standing down. We have no questions for this witness, Your Honor. Let's move on to the next witness, because she's a little too pure in her capacity as a pure victim in this case.
Whew. Ebony. Okay. Wow.
I do this for real, Carlos. Don't play with me now.
No.
I do this for real, baby. 99, Kingdom Reign, TMZ. I'm gonna be up chopping it up with Harvey Levin tomorrow, baby. I do this for real, baby.
I know. Oh, honey, let's be clear. That's why I am grateful and honored that
I'm
you
just
said yes. And I can only I can only do this with you. I can imagine do this with anyone else. Yeah. I am floored by the factual account of your legal profession. Which also brings me to this. Mm-hmm. The sex workers, one of them went on the witness stand and pretty much told his alleged account of things that happened in terms of the activities between Puff, Cassie, etc. And listen, no need to go into the very insane details. It's very elaborate. Mm-hmm. But more so than that, what happened recently, Ebony, is photos of these sex workers were released to the public. Mm-hmm. It's around 6 or 7 guys, different races, different complexions, different heights. They are now revealed to the world as being sex workers. Can you explain to me why these images are out for us to see?
I think this is the definition of publicity and PR versus the legal. So there's a reason why they weren't, going. This is not a big piece of key evidence in the legal case, because again, they don't move the needle on the legal charges. I believe that they were released to the public. I think there's aspects of homophobia. I think there's aspects of, again, just kind of broadly demonizing the freakish nature, if you will, of Sean Combs. This is to purport and advance a public narrative, a PR narrative of, you don't really know this man. Y'all was diddy bopping and bobbing along and shiny suit man and all that to an individual you have no idea about, because this is how he really gets down. And I'm going to tell you personally, and I am speaking personally, I don't like it. I actually don't like it. I don't think that this helps the case from a prosecution standpoint. And I believe we know that it was the prosecution that made this available to us. And maybe if we don't, then scratch that. But either way, I don't like it. I don't think it is anything. It doesn't, it's not evidentiary. of anything noteworthy to prove the guilt nor innocence of Sean Combs. So why is it in the ethos? Other than, like I said, to kind of feed into some instinctual homophobic tendencies, and just kind of broader demonization of him as an individual. And I'm not into it, because I think let the case stand on its merits, go with the evidence that proves the elements of the things at bay, the coercion, the racketeering, the sex trafficking, and the prostitution across state lines. I want to hear about that. I don't want to see some men that he may or may not have had involved in broader sexual activities. And this is the issue with the men. And this is why I don't really even, I hope we don't hear from a lot of these male sex workers, to be candid, unless it is to something very specific. But these ones that are getting on the stand and just simply saying that they were bought, paid for, participated in consensual sexual acts, y'all can keep a lot of that. I don't want to hear 5 or 6 different men testifying to that, Carlos. And I think if they do that, if they make a tactical error, and I'm talking about the prosecution in this case, and keep putting these various men on the stand to talk about that, it's going to tire the jury out. And it's going to lean more towards the defense's argument. It actually helps the defense when they do that, Carlos, because it says, well, maybe he was a freak and maybe he liked a him and a her situation, but that's not a crime. And it's not. So we got to stick to the things that are proving criminal activity and less about the sensationalism. And I say that too about the sensationalism, rather. I say that too about these still images of the Freakoffs themselves. I don't think that had probative value. I don't think seeing because in fact, I think it worked against him, Carlos. I think if the jury is seeing Cassie Ventura today, 8 months pregnant, stunning, gorgeous, maternal, ethereal, married, composed, more or less, why are you now giving me a juxtaposed image of her in a very sexual, deviant, you're showing me Madonna whore at the same time, proverbially speaking. And it's much better to let the jury see her as Madonna, recount in her own testimony her moments of activity and this and that. But for showing the visual, I don't think it served any purpose.
They need you on their case. Allegedly. Okay. So
not allegedly.
I want to cover all bases. It's because the thing is this. I was in high school when the O.J. Simpson trial was going on. And I remember the day of the verdict, I was in class and our teacher allowed us to watch the verdict being read. But years later, Ebony, is when I learned that sensationalism played a huge part into that trial. So everything you're saying to me, I resonate with, because I do know, look, it's one thing to state the facts. And that's the reason why I do want to get into the psychology of all of this, because again, what I want to remind people that you have been doing a good job at always, reminding us during these chats, is the fact that P. Diddy is not on trial for domestic abuse. He's on trial for sex trafficking, racketeering, prostitution across state lines. And we're not hearing a lot of that, but I do understand, based on your commentary last week, they're trying to paint this picture of Puffy being this alleged monster. So with that being said, a psychologist is testifying. Can you explain to us the reason behind this decision?
Now, this was very smart of the prosecution. The smartest thing I think they've done since Cassie's testimony. So the jury heard, Carlos, from a clinician. She's a board certified forensic and clinical psychologist. Her name is Dawn Hughes. Very important testimony here, because she was able to speak to the psychological warfare of being a domestic violence victim. She's able to speak to why domestic violence victims stay, right? And victims of sexual abuse and physical abuse stay in relationship to their abuser. She's able to speak to oftentimes how they black out, how they have such severe trauma that they don't even want to admit the trauma to themselves, let alone admit it to law enforcement. So that takes care of the, why is she just saying something now? Why didn't she say anything years ago? Why didn't she go straight to the police? So when they hear from this expert witness psychologist, there's a reason why. There's a reason why victims sometimes don't say anything for 5, 10, 15, or even 20 years plus. And it's a legitimate psychological reason. There's a reason why many times victims stay in capture. She was able, Carlos, to specifically speak about financial tethers to your abuser, and how when the abuser can effectively freeze and reduce your financial autonomy, a la, as Cassie testified to, putting you on an allowance, directly paying all of your rent and bills so that you don't have any financial autonomy or freedom, making you only get 1 record deal out of your 10 record deal contract so that your income is significantly reduced by virtue of what you could or should be earning. This witness, Don Hughes, the psychologist, Carlos, testified to how financial control can be a part of the psychological control tactic of an abuser. This is very important for the jurors to hear. Now, I want to note, the judge does not allow this witness to testify to something called coercive control. So basically, you can testify to how controlling the finances, the sexual nature of the relationship between the abuser and the victim, when consensual versus when it's not consensual, and how that's muddied. All of that's fair game to testify to, but you cannot go the extra step and connect the dots of coercion and control as it relates to the psychological of it. And I think the reason why, Carlos, is because he wants the jurors to be able to decide that for themselves. And that's important, right? If this is going to be a just trial, because that's when you start getting into mistrial or turned over on appeal territory. If the judge had not allowed this restriction of this psychologist's testimony and let her say, and because Sean Combs controlled her money, because Sean Combs enjoyed a romantic relationship outside of the abusive one that they also had, that constitutes coercive control. If I'm defense, mistrial, you've now tainted the juror's ability to do what they're supposed to do in that jury room in 6 weeks from now, which is weigh the evidence for themselves, Carlos King, and make that determination whether or not the actions of Sean Combs rose to coercion. That's what we're going to be talking about when we're doing this in 6 weeks, and we talking about closing arguments, and we getting ready to go into jury deliberation. That's a conversation for then, not now. And I think the judge is pretty remarkable on this case, Carlos. I want to say that for your raindrops. Okay. He's making extraordinarily disciplined rulings, and it's very, very, very good. This is what it should look like.
When it comes to the psychologist, is she also going to be used to, yes, paint the picture of domestic violence victims, in addition to the fact that based on Cassie's recent testimony, what was uncovered is the prosecution detailed that she allegedly was like this willing participant, that Cassie would text Puff saying, I want the Freakoff, I love you. She would sometimes allegedly have sex with the sex workers without Puff being present. And based upon that, a lot of people feel like, well, okay, how much control did this man have when, even when you were not with him, you wanted the Freakoffs, you wanted to please him, you said you loved him, you would set things up. He said you could have boyfriends. You text him that you feel some kind of way, that he's spending the holidays with the now deceased Kim Porter, the mother of 3 of his children, and she feels lonely. Is the psychologist also, in your opinion, going to take us, and the jurors obviously, yes, on the journey of like why Cassie was doing those things?
So I want to be super clear. The short answer is yes, but here is an important caveat, and I need the raindrops to pay attention to this. This expert witness, this psychologist, Don Hughes, is not in any way, Carlos, testifying specifically about Cassie Ventura, Sean Combs, or anybody else named in this case. She is here as a generalist. And I actually think this is really good. So she has not talked to any of these victims or defendants or witnesses. She doesn't know anything about it. She said, I've seen basic trial stuff on the pre-end, but I have intentionally turned away from it. She's like, hey, listen, I'm not here to talk about what she, he, they, or them did or knew. I'm only speaking as an expert in this academic and clinical space of psychology as it relates to sex and physical abuse. So she's speaking in general terms, which I think is very good, Carlos, because this allows the juries to zoom out of just Cassie and Diddy, Cassie and Diddy, Cassie and Diddy, and zoom out enough to say, this is a broader systemic dynamic at play that says that when one is in a long-term romantic sexual relationship with another, and it has elements of financial control, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, like you were saying, the lines can and do get blurred around what is consent here, but force here. What is, I'm saying I want to please you, so it could look like consent, but it's actually a psychological dynamic at play where I am afraid to not please you. See how layered it becomes? Because you have physically abused me so many times. You've threatened my life. You've threatened my family. You've threatened the men I've dated. You tell me I can have boyfriends, but then you blow up their car or you say you're going to hurt them. So that's what the psychologist is testifying to, Carlos. And this is an excellent question on your part because it gets to the nuance and the microscopic nature of what must be analyzed by these jurors on this case. This is not going to be easy for the jurors. So anybody saying this is open and shut is missing it. They are absolutely missing it. And anybody making predictions week 2 is out of order. Okay, period. Because there's too much to go. And the last thing I'll say on this one, Carlos, this is why I don't like when the prosecution, to me, waste precious capacity and time with steal shots from the Freakoff or giving us a bunch of these male escort testimonies, because it takes the juror's eye off the ball. And there's too many other really important moving parts that they really need to be deciphering and sifting through and paying attention to. Don't give them no extra shit. They already got enough on their plate. Stick to the through line of this man's behavior, the enterprise he ran and controlled, the individuals that make up that enterprise that he controlled, the actions that they did that led to the RICO, the sex trafficking, and the coercion, and make the case. But all of this playing into the baby oil and lube and high heels of it all, I think it works against them. I really do.
And lastly, Kid Cudi has been confirmed to take the witness stand. What we already know publicly is the fact that Diddy allegedly is responsible for blowing up Kid Cudi's car because at the time he was dating Cassie. How important is Kid Cudi's testimony, and what do you think we're going to get out of it, especially for the jurors?
Kid Cudi's testimony could be, pardon the pun, you know what I'm about to say, explosive. But no, you set it up so nice, Carlos. I had to.
No, hey, honey, you Michael Jordan that thing to a slam dunk. Go ahead, sis.
Okay, but no, it really is going to be hugely important. And let me tell you why. So when you go back to the original indictment, okay, the original indictment, not the supersedings, the original indictment that we all saw come down from the feds summer of 2024. Yeah, okay. In the first paragraph, Carlos, the prosecution lays out what they intend to prove. Count 1, racketeering and all of this, right? And under that, they're pretty specific. They say what we're going to prove that the criminal enterprise participated in is, yes, sexual abuse, yes, physical abuse, but also arson. And many people were like, arson? That's giving mafia. That's giving Goodfellas. What the hell is arson involved? And then it went on to other things, guns and things like this. Well, here's some of the arson, at least some of it, right? And as you said correctly, at least per the New York Times, Kid Cudi and his reps have acknowledged and affirmed that one of his vehicles was blown up. We know that happened. What we don't know yet, that we will get on this stand from Kid Cudi directly, is whether or not he believes or can prove Sean Combs is responsible for his car being blown up. See, that dot must still be connected. Just because your car got blown up, you might have pissed off the mailman. I don't know. That's what the defense is going to say. So you must take us through, Mr. Cudi, what would lead you to reasonably conclude that your car was blown up because you were involved romantically with Cassie Ventura, girlfriend of Sean Combs. And that, once the prosecution connects that dots, if they are able to, That's going to be very important for this, because that's when the jurors can start looking at the indictment in the I'm talking about the deliberation room, and say, oh, I see the arson. Oh, I see the physical abuse per the mother's testimony, per Cassie's testimony. That's how you get a conviction, not Astroglide and 6-inch heels. No shade.
No, I mean,
no shade.
I can't follow that. MK Williams, once again, you were explosive. You deliver a slam dunk. I am your Scottie Pippen. You're my Michael Jordan, and I appreciate you doing this for us, the Raindrops, educating us on this Diddy case. We'll see you next Thursday. But in the meantime, where can the Raindrops watch you? Because you were making a lot of appearances based on this trial.
Yes, well, I think what we do here every week, Carlos, is important. It's important to society, and it's very important to the culture. So check us out every Thursday, of course. Follow me on Instagram. I'm a grandma millennial, so that's my only social media. Don't check for me on TikTok, baby. You won't find me. I'm not there. Ebony K. Williams, EBONIK Williams. I'm doing a breakdown that drops every Thursday as well with Harvey Levin, TMZ. That's Nancy Grace and Garagos and, the good OJ veterans of it all. And I'm very
gonna say the legend.
The legend. Yes. Oh, they're the Mount Rushmore of true crime and celebrity justice. So to be the millennial amongst the greats is a privilege. So that check that out for some additional context. And then I'm also working with ABC News and doing some moonlighting with them. So check out Nightline, check out Hulu. Auntie will be around for this. Yeah, because it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack, But doing it one-on-one, you're the only one where I'm doing this level of detail because we're one-on-one and we're doing it every week. So
no, and I appreciate that. And listen, you are the voice of the culture and the community, so we thank you for your services. Okay.
Love you. See you next week.
I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.